You've been on this spiritual journey for years. Shadow work, meditation, consciousness expansion, constant growth. But lately, something's shifted. You're not meditating as much. You're not obsessed with spiritual content. You're not talking about awakening constantly. And instead of feeling guilty about it, you feel relieved, peaceful, complete. Here's what most people don't understand. This isn't spiritual regression. It's spiritual completion. Carl Jung discovered that genuine awakening has an ending point. Not because you've failed, but because you've succeeded. The journey completes. The work integrates. And you return to ordinary life, transformed. Today, I'm revealing the 5 signs Jung identified that your spiritual awakening is actually over. Not stuck, not lost, not backsliding, but complete. And if you're experiencing these signs right now, Jung would say congratulations. You've done what most spiritual seekers never do. You've actually finished the journey. Here's what changes everything. Jung discovered that spiritual awakening isn't a permanent state. It's a transitional process. You don't stay awakened in the dramatic, intense, constantly transforming way. You awaken, integrate, and then return to normal life. But you return different. The awakening ends. The transformation remains. Most spiritual seekers think the goal is to stay in perpetual awakening, constantly expanding, forever seeking, always growing. But Jung observed something radical. People who actually complete individuation stop seeking, stop expanding, stop identifying as spiritual. They become remarkably ordinary. And that ordinariness is the sign of completion, not failure. Jung called this the return to the marketplace. After the hero's journey into the depths, after the transformation, after the awakening, you come back. Not to who you were, but to where you were. And the signs that you've truly completed this journey might surprise you. The first one definitely will. Jung's first sign. When your spiritual awakening is over, you stop being obsessed with spirituality. You're not constantly reading spiritual books, watching spiritual content, attending workshops, seeking teachers. Not because you've rejected spirituality, because you've integrated it. Before completion, spirituality is your identity. You're a seeker, a spiritual person, someone on a journey. Your life revolves around practices, concepts, growth. But Jung discovered that when individuation completes, spirituality stops being an identity and becomes simply how you live. One of Jung's patients described this shift. For 5 years, I was obsessed. Every book was about consciousness. Every conversation turned spiritual. My entire life was the journey. Then one day, I realized I hadn't read a spiritual book in months, hadn't meditated in weeks, hadn't thought about awakening, and instead of panicking, I felt complete, like I'd digested everything, and it was now just part of me. This is what Jung meant by integration. The teachings aren't separate from you anymore. They are you. You don't need to constantly consume spiritual content because you've become the content. You don't need to practice being conscious because consciousness is your natural state now. You'll notice you're drawn to regular things again. Fiction books, movies, hobbies that aren't spiritual, conversations about mundane topics, and you enjoy them without guilt. Because you're not using them to avoid spirituality, you've completed spirituality and can return to simplicity. But here's the paradox Jung identified. You're more spiritual now than when you were obsessed with spirituality. Because before, you were performing it. Now, you're living it. Before, it was an identity. Now, it's your nature. The obsession ending is the sign that the work is done. But if you think losing spiritual obsession is a clear sign, The second indicator is even more definitive. This is Jung's most radical sign. When your awakening is over, you stop searching for meaning. Not because life is meaningless, but because you found the answer, and it wasn't what you expected. The entire awakening journey is driven by the question, what does this mean? What's my purpose? Why am I here? What's the point? You search for meaning in everything. Synchronicities, dreams, experiences, relationships. You're convinced there's some ultimate answer you need to find. But Jung discovered something that stops seekers in their tracks. The search for meaning ends when you realize you are the meaning. Not that you found it, that you're creating it. The meaning isn't hidden somewhere waiting to be discovered. It's being generated by you, through you, as you. One of Jung's most profound patients, a philosopher who'd spent decades searching for life's meaning, described his breakthrough. I was in meditation asking, what's my purpose? When suddenly I realized the question itself was the problem. There is no meaning to find. There's only meaning to create, and I'd been creating it all along without realizing it. The moment I saw this, the search ended. Not because I found the answer, but because I understood there was no answer to find. This is what Jung called the end of metaphysical seeking. You stop looking for some cosmic purpose written in the stars. You stop waiting to discover your divine mission. You stop trying to decode the universe's plan for you. Because you realize you're the author, not the reader. You'll notice you stop asking, why did this happen? And start simply responding to what happens. You stop trying to figure out what the universe is telling you and start trusting your own knowing. You stop seeking signs and start making choices. The locus of meaning shifts from out there to in here. But here's what's beautiful. Life doesn't become meaningless. It becomes more meaningful. Because now the meaning is authentic, created by you, not discovered in some external script. You're finally living your life, instead of trying to figure out what your life is supposed to be. And this leads directly to the third sign that Jung said proves awakening is complete. Here's what Jung discovered that liberates people. When your awakening is over, you stop trying to fix yourself. Not because you're perfect, but because you've realized you were never broken. The awakening journey is often driven by a feeling that something's wrong with you. You need healing, growth, improvement, transformation. You're not enough yet. Not conscious enough, not healed enough, not integrated enough. There's always more work to do, more shadow to integrate, more trauma to process. But Jung observed that people who complete individuation stop this endless self-improvement project, not through giving up, through recognition. They see that the belief they needed fixing was itself the problem. The wound they were trying to heal was the belief they were wounded. One of Jung's patients, a woman who'd been in therapy for 8 years, described the moment she completed. I was in a session working on my issues when suddenly I asked myself, what if there are no issues? What if I've just been telling myself a story that I'm broken? The moment I questioned that story, it dissolved. I wasn't fixed. I realized I'd never been broken. This is what Jung meant by the acceptance of wholeness. You're not perfect. You still have patterns, triggers, wounds, but you're no longer identifying with them as problems that need solving. They're just part of being human. You've stopped being at war with yourself. You'll notice you stop consuming self-help content. Stop analyzing every behavior. Stop trying to optimize yourself. You're kinder to yourself, but not because you've fixed all your flaws, because you've accepted you're human, and humans are inherently flawed. And that's okay. This doesn't mean you never grow or change. You do. But it happens organically, not through force. You evolve naturally, like a plant growing. not through constant intervention and self-improvement projects. The exhausting project of becoming ends. The ease of being begins. But there's a fourth sign that Jung said is perhaps the clearest indicator that the journey is complete. If you're recognizing these signs, if you've lost interest in spirituality, stopped searching for meaning, no longer trying to fix yourself, Jung would say, you're not losing your awakening. You're completing it. Before we continue, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Now, these final 2 signs reveal what comes after awakening ends. This is Jung's most unexpected sign. When your awakening is over, you become comfortable being ordinary, not special, not enlightened, not different from everyone else, just ordinary. And that ordinariness is the ultimate achievement. During awakening, there's often a phase of feeling special. You're seeing things others don't see, understanding things others don't understand. You're awake while they're asleep. You're conscious while they're unconscious. There's a subtle, or not so subtle, sense of being spiritually advanced. But Jung discovered that when individuation truly completes, this specialness dissolves. You realize everyone's on their own journey. You're not more awake, you're differently awake. You're not enlightened, you're just yourself. The need to be spiritually significant falls away. One of Jung's analysts, a meditation teacher who'd built an identity around being awakened, described this humbling. I'd spent years positioning myself as conscious compared to unconscious people. Then I had an experience where I saw clearly, I'm just a human with the same struggles, the same fears, the same petty concerns as everyone else. My awakening hadn't made me special. It had made me ordinary in a way I'd been avoiding, and accepting that ordinariness was the final step. This is what Jung called the descent of the divine into the human. You stop trying to transcend your humanity and start embracing it. You stop performing enlightenment and start living as a regular person. You become remarkably unremarkable. You'll notice you stop dropping spiritual terminology. Stop subtly letting people know you're awakened. Stop needing recognition for your consciousness. You're happy being seen as normal, average, nothing special. Because you've realized that being ordinary is more profound than being extraordinary ever was. This terrifies the ego, because the ego wants to be special. But the self, your deepest nature, is already whole and doesn't need specialness. When you're comfortable being ordinary, you've shifted from ego to self, and that's completion. But there's one final sign Jung identified that confirms the awakening journey has truly ended. Jung's final and most important sign. When your awakening is over, you return to ordinary life with full engagement, not spiritual bypass, not detachment, not living above life, but diving back into life. Work, relationships, responsibilities, pleasures, with complete presence and participation. During awakening, there's often withdrawal from life. You need solitude. You can't engage with normal activities. You're processing, integrating, transforming. The world feels too much. You retreat. And this is necessary. But Jung observed that completion looks like return. The hero's journey has 3 stages: separation from the ordinary world, transformation in the extraordinary world, return to the ordinary world. Most spiritual seekers get stuck in stage 2. They stay in the transformation phase, perpetually processing, perpetually in retreat. But Jung insisted, the journey isn't complete until you return. One of Jung's most successful patients described his return. After 3 years of intense inner work, I realized I'd been avoiding life, using spirituality as an excuse to not deal with career, relationships, finances. Then something shifted. I wanted to engage again. I got a job, started dating, paid attention to practical matters, not from obligation, from genuine interest. Life stopped being the thing I was escaping through spirituality and became the thing I was finally ready to live. This is what Jung meant by being in the world, but not of it. You participate fully in ordinary life, career, relationships, responsibilities, but you're no longer identified with these things. You can engage without being consumed. You can care without being attached. You can participate without being lost. You'll notice you're more present with people, more engaged with work, more interested in everyday pleasures. You're watching movies, cooking meals, having conversations about nothing, and enjoying it. Not because you've regressed spiritually, but because you've integrated spiritually. The sacred and the ordinary aren't separate anymore. Jung observed that his most individuated patients became remarkably normal. They had regular jobs, normal relationships, everyday concerns. But there was a quality to their presence that was different, a depth beneath the ordinary, a peace within the activity. They'd completed the journey and returned home, but home was transformed by the journey. The 5 signs your spiritual awakening is over. You're no longer obsessed with spirituality. The search for meaning has ended. You've stopped trying to fix yourself. You're comfortable being ordinary. You've returned to life with full engagement. Jung would want you to understand, these aren't signs of failure. They're signs of completion. The awakening process is meant to end. You're not supposed to stay in perpetual seeking, constant growth, endless transformation. You awaken, integrate, and then live. Most spiritual seekers never complete because they think the journey is infinite. They stay stuck in seeking mode, forever processing, perpetually awakening. But Jung discovered that genuine individuation has a completion point. You reach a state of basic okayness with yourself, with life, with reality. And from that okayness, you simply live. If you're experiencing these signs, don't panic that you're losing your spirituality. You're not. You're finishing it. The dramatic phase of awakening is ending. The integrated phase of living is beginning. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. If you're no longer obsessed with spiritual content, if you've stopped searching for meaning, if you're comfortable being ordinary, Jung would say, well done. You've completed what most people spend lifetimes trying to complete. The journey is over. Now the living begins. This doesn't mean you'll never grow again. Growth continues. But it's not the desperate, seeking, trying to fix yourself growth. It's organic evolution. You change because life changes you, not because you're forcing transformation. The awakening is over, but what awakened remains. You're not the person you were before the journey. You're integrated, whole, at peace with yourself and life. And now you get to live from that wholeness without the burden of perpetual seeking. Jung believed the goal of individuation wasn't to become something extraordinary. It was to become completely yourself. And that complete self is remarkably ordinary. It works, loves, lives, laughs. It has problems and pleasures. It's human. And being fully human, without apology or improvement project, is the ultimate spiritual achievement. Welcome to the end of awakening. Welcome to the beginning of life. Subscribe to explore more of Jung's insights on completing the individuation journey. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.